So first things first, if I haven't met you guys before, great to meet you. I'm Henry, and currently in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, I ran on an online strength and conditioning company, Integrate Sports, and grew it to sort of 30, 40 clients, worked in hockey strength and conditioning specifically, and during that time learned all about AI automation. And so now I'm essentially teaching other coaches how to use this technology to save themselves time, to deliver a much better client experience, and to make you more efficient with your business systems as well. So what we're going to do in this presentation is look at 3 different systems to save you 10 hours a week. One is client onboarding, one is client check-ins, and one is call transcripts, essentially. So you can use AI to extract information from call transcripts. Just before I go ahead, just to let you guys know, the call is being recorded. That's not going to be shared with anybody else. It's just for my own internal use. So don't worry about kind of your name being shared with anyone else on social media or anything like that. It's purely just for myself and my own records. As we're going through, you can ask questions. If you've joined this Menti, at the bottom, if you sort of scroll down on your phone, there's a little Q&A section, so you can ask questions on there. So if you've got any questions you want to ask me, pop them in there and they will pop up in this bottom right hand corner here, so other people can also see the questions. So if there's like a good question that's popped up, you can sort of thumbs up and upvote it and you'll be more likely to get answered. But at any point you like, pop a question in and I will answer it as we go along, or if it makes more sense, I can sort of just batch answer them towards the end. That sounds good. So as I say, there's 3 different systems. I'm going to try and make it as interactive as possible. I've set it up so that you guys can basically interact and go through the systems yourself. So rather than me just talking at you about the possibilities, you guys can actually run through it yourself and see it working live, which should be good fun. So as I say, with the presentation, this is what we're going to look at. So how to save 10 hours a week. And as I say, my previous business was in online fitness coaching, and now I'm helping coaches to install similar systems. So this is what we're going to be looking at today. So first things first, keen to get in sort of input from you guys to begin with. What would you say is the one task? You can again enter this on the Menti as you've joined. What's the task that you think takes up the most amount of time for you each week? I've left this super open-ended so you can answer whatever question, whatever answer you like. It could be around content, it could be more sort of admin focused, it might be check-ins or onboarding, like whichever task you think each week takes up most amount of your time. So it might be that, I know some of you, for example, are just starting out, so it might be that actually you're just learning all these systems, so that's also totally fine. But for anyone who's kind of been doing this for a little longer, maybe there are other tasks which might kind of spring to mind there. So as I kind of thought, those are the main areas around the client delivery that tend to take up the most amount of time, and that's getting clients into the system. So onboarding is obviously quite a popular one, and client check-ins as well, which for me took up a huge amount of time each week, because obviously as you scale up, you take on more clients, then you've obviously got more check-ins to process as well. Which we're going to look at how to make that a lot more efficient, and what's in there as well, content, calendar. Okay, cool. Obviously the scope of this was not really broad enough to be able to look at how to do content systems as well. I wouldn't say that content's sort of my area of expertise in the same way that actually working with clients and building out those systems is. So we're going to focus more on the client delivery side today. So onboarding, probably the top one for now, which is good to know. We'll definitely be covering off that in just a second. So what I thought I'd do is kickstart off by looking at what actually is a good criteria for AI automation. I think at the moment there is so much noise online about the use of AI, different tools that are available, the possibilities of it, and it can be kind of confusing to know, well, cutting through all of this, what is actually a good criteria for it? What makes it a good use and what's actually not a good use of AI? These would probably be the top 4 criteria in my mind at the moment for what makes AI automation very effective for a coach. Firstly, it's got to be something that is really repetitive, which is why something like onboarding would definitely tick that box. It's got to be time consuming. It's got to be taking up lots of your time each week. It's got to follow rules. So if it's really broad and it's quite complex and it needs nuance and that coaching intuition, it is not a good fit at the moment, because the technology isn't designed to replace you as a coach. It's designed to be a tool to use to enhance your delivery. So it can't replace that complexity of decision making. Human judgment, whenever human judgment is needed, again, would be where that wouldn't be a good criteria. So if something is repetitive, time consuming, follows rules, and doesn't really need any human intervention, it can just happen, it's a great use case for AI automation. So let's look at some good ones and some bad ones. Bad examples would be handling sensitive client situations. So you might have some sensitive client data, you might have a sensitive situation you're dealing with. Clearly, you don't want to just be chucking that into AI and just hoping that it's going to give you the right answers, because one, there's data protection issues to look at there. And number two, it isn't supposed to replace you as the coach. As I say, it's designed to give you a skill set to make you more efficient, but not to replace that interaction with the client themselves. Number two, developing a coaching philosophy. I see people just sort of using ChatGPT and sort of asking it to just think for itself. Like, I would really encourage you guys to try to not sort of outsource your thinking and critical thinking. Like, you should be developing your own critical thinking and your own philosophy over time. And that's not something which AI can tell you what to do. I think that's something which, as you develop your coaching philosophy, that's just going to happen over time, just because that happens through experience. So I wouldn't say that's a very good use case. Number three, coaching decisions as well. So that would be where you've got that complexity of decision making. Maybe you've got a particular case with a client where there's a bit of complexity there. Maybe there's some sort of medical consideration, or there's some kind of emotional layer to the decision that needs to be made. Not a good use case, essentially. Good use cases, though, are things where all of that is in place. So you've got things like really basic client data, perhaps just drafting a response ready for human review, and that's the element that is key there. So you draft the response, but you're the one who checks it, and you're the one who makes those final decisions. You're not being the one who has to summarize large amounts of data and write it all yourself from scratch. It does it for you, and then you're the one who checks it afterwards and before sending, rather than just firing out emails to clients. You don't want that. Lastly, in extracting information from calls and documents. So it's very, very good at taking masses of data, extracting it all and summarizing it really quickly. It can do that at 100 times the speed of the human brain. So it's very, very good for large amounts of client data. But as I say, basic client data, you don't want it to feed it confidential information. But if it's things like key dates, payments, things like that, it can do extremely, extremely well. So let's look at the first use case. You guys, obviously, number one was client onboarding. In general, if you can automate this, and there's a way of making this pretty advanced, which we'll look at in just a second, it could save you, depending on client load, around 3 hours a week of just doing the same thing over and over again. It meets those criteria because it is repetitive, it is time consuming, it generally follows rules, and it doesn't really need a huge amount of human intervention because everyone should follow a similar pattern. When it's done well, it's a really seamless experience for the client. You don't have to use manual data entry and manually adding people to apps and manually sending emails and trying to find the links to various things. So you get instant clarity. So again, quick sort of word cloud for you guys, maybe 60 seconds. When a client joins your program, how do you want them to feel ultimately? Like, what's the overall impression you want them to get when they first sign up? And try and think of it from a emotional layer, ideally. So like, what's the overarching feeling for a client when they sign up with you? What kind of impression do you want them to be left with? If you're struggling or you haven't got kind of an answer to that one, that's okay. It might just be a case of having a think about this at the moment, and just start and think about what types of things you want a client to experience. Obviously, you want them to get clarity. You want them to feel supported. You want them to get the information that they need straight away and not feel kind of lost. And I think there probably just needs to be a clear path forward, like a clear plan as well. That's some of the key things. So again, if you're not quite sure exactly how they should feel, not a problem. But from an outside perspective, I think from a client, what a client really wants is clarity. They want to know exactly what's coming up next, and they want to feel like it's personalized. And that's another really key aspect of how we can take a basic automation of onboarding. Okay, good. Yeah, how you can help them, definitely. And we can add in a really personalized component to this, which is what you guys are going to get next, which is a personalized welcome document off the back of an intake form, which I'll show you how to do in just a second. So key thing is how you can ultimately help. And I think what a client wants to know is, within the first 10 minutes, what's the plan? What happens next? How can you help me? And is this actually going to be personalized or not? Is it just really generic? So I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so quick stat for you. There was some research by Zendesk, which is a customer service sort of SaaS company, and they found that 90% of consumers said they're willing to spend more with companies that personalize the customer service experience. So rather than it being a hyper generic onboarding, what we can do is add in this personalization layer, which will essentially take a client's intake form and information and produce a really hyper personalized welcome document. So they've got a plan of action for the first 7 days. It's really customized to their needs, and it's not just the same sort of welcome information that every single client gets. So everyone feels like they're getting a much more personalized support on the onboarding. Another key bit around the customer service part of the onboarding is there's a significant link between the client onboarding experience and the rate of churn for online coaching businesses. And the experience that a client gets in the first 7 days with onboarding is directly tied to the churn rate of clients. In other words, clients who get a good experience on the onboarding, stay for longer, and have a much better experience. Obviously, that's what we all want. So the old way looks a bit like this. The payment comes through, you kind of scramble to find the right links. Maybe you're trying to manually add them to a True Coach or a Trainerize or a Train Heroic. You manually send them emails with welcome information, and it's kind of a little bit ad hoc and not overall very good. It feels a bit clunky, takes forever, probably takes you far too long each week, which is for some of you what you've said already. Now with the new way, this is how we could do it. We could get a payment to come through, that which triggers some actions. The first thing would be that an intake form gets sent directly to them, which is a fairly basic automation. A client gets added to the training app, which again is automated. The AI component to this is then you get a personalized welcome document. So I'm going to get you guys to do this now. I'm going to fit in a welcome document for my fictitious coaching company, Gains and Pains. And what you're going to get is a welcome document personalized to you, custom branded to Gains and Pains. So I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. So if you follow this link, and I will add the link to the chat if this hasn't come through, you should be able to click that directly on the app. I'm going to show you myself typing in into the document. You guys can do this as well. So let me just... You're going to get a sort of welcome message that's going to say, thanks for filling in the form. And shortly in your email inbox, you're going to basically receive a welcome document. Now, what's happening at the moment is, without explaining how this entire process works, this system here is basically taking the form, it's taking it through an AI automation, and it's creating a document for you automatically, and then it's going to email you that document. So you can see it's sort of firing off at the moment, and it's taking some actions. So if you go back to your inbox, you should start to see these coming through. And if you go to your junk folder as well, just in case, but it should start coming through fairly soon. So here's mine that's just come through already. So that's the speed at which this works. So it now says, thanks for completing your intake form. Welcome to Gains and Pains. And here's your personalized welcome document. So bearing in mind, I've just said, I have got lower back pain. I'm trying to train to do 10 pull-ups, and I want to become a beast on the badminton court. We've now got a custom branded welcome document from Gains and Pains that was produced in, as you saw, 60 seconds. So you can sort of see how you can make this super, super tailored. So it says, obviously, welcome to me. It's got a headline around pull-up strength and badminton strength. It's given us kind of a high-level overview of what the goal is. It's given us a bit of a game plan, how many sessions a week, progressive overload. It's got this week's mission. So we've got a 1 week essentially action plan. So we're going to do scat pulls, dead hangs, assisted negatives to work on the pull-up strength. And then it's given the contact details, how to get in touch, how to get supported in the first 7 days. So hopefully you can see from that already that, first of all, it gives you, and this is obviously super fictitious, but it's hyper-personalised. It gives you an action plan. It gives real clarity for the person individually. And the key thing is, all of this can be completely customized. So your intake form could ask any questions that you, the coach, need to know. The Gamma document builder can produce any format that you want. I've just made this slightly silly Gains and Pains coaching company, but this could be obviously tailored to your needs and your branding and how you do things. But what you as the client now have is absolute clarity on what your goal is going to be, how you're going to work on that in the next 7 days. And imagine how much time it would take you as a coach to create something like this, to give you each individual client that level of clarity. And it's just produced that document in 45 seconds. So that's a good example with an intake, how we can essentially massively speed up the speed at which you get clarity as a coaching client. So I hope that's been useful. If you've done this and it's coming through to your inbox, hopefully you've started to get some emails coming through. Just check your junk folder in case it has maybe gone in there. But I hope that just gives you one example now within onboarding of how you can make this so much more personalized to the client. Okie dokie, amazing. So that's system one. That's just to give you kind of what is possible with this type of system. So you have the intake form, you then have this AI layer, which basically builds out a customized action plan. And then you've got a document builder that can be created inside of a minute. Now, if you imagine trying to do that yourself as a coach, that's probably a 45 to 60-minute job just per client, whereas that's just produced it inside of a minute. So just to show you what's possible with AI, it is significantly more powerful than just using ChatGPT to ask you questions you used to Google. It's got this ability to create hyper-personalized support. Okay, system two is check-ins. Check-ins is another system which can take a lot of time simply because you've got lots of clients who need your support. You've got obviously lots of forms being filled in. It can be quite a lot of detail to process. And if we think back to what the criteria are for AI, anything which is repetitive, time consuming, and kind of can be essentially outsourced to rules, something like check-ins works really well. So if someone's, for example, like on a green path, like green that week, then you can give them a set of rules to follow inside the system, and it can produce a high-level review and summary back to you. Perhaps you're a kind of amber score and you've got some good, some not so good, then again, it can give you kind of quite nuanced support based around that. So the old way with this is a little bit ad hoc. So it might be that you're just sort of checking in a bit randomly with clients. It doesn't really lack detail when you're doing that. And the experience for the clients is a little bit inconsistent because perhaps it's not the same cadence every week around when they get that support. Perhaps it's not that consistent in terms of the quality of the feedback they're getting. And you as the coach might be doing this a little bit ad hoc as well. Like you're only replying to check-ins at certain times in the day, or maybe certain things and details slip through the cracks. What we want to do with the new way is get automated reminders. So on a consistent basis, the client themselves is receiving the check-in reminders rather than we having to remember every single time. Two, there's AI analysis that can draft replies. So again, we said the important detail wasn't that you get sent the check-in reply straight away, but that you kind of have this human intervention layer just before that, where it drafts out a reply, and then you get to respond back. The key thing here is it maps against current client goals and it's compared against previous check-ins. So you just have to review the summary and then create the draft. Now, as you've just entered the system now, so you've just completed your intake form, imagine you're the client now in my coaching business, Gains and Pains, and you're going to fill in your first check-in form. Because it already knows who you are, because you just filled in what your goals are, how often you want to train, any kind of existing issues, it has the capability to extract all of that information from the database, extract all of your check-in data, basically match the two together and say, okay, given where you're at with your check-in this week, how does that compare against what you want to be achieving and where you're going with your current training goals? So it's not just an out of context check-in form. It knows who the client is, it knows what their goals are, it knows what constraints perhaps they've faced before, and it can match the two together and produce a really personalized reply back. So again, going to get you guys to have a go at doing this yourselves. So we're going to complete the check-in with Gains and Pains. You can follow this link again. I'll put it into the chat again if you haven't quite got the link to hand. What's going to happen this time is that it's going to email you straight away. And the reason for that is that I just want you to experience the speed at which it can process check-ins and give you feedback. So if we go back to this check-in form, and again, I'll put it into the chat box for you guys. And then it's going to start to process that and get me email. There we go. So I've got my email back already. Let's sort that shoulder out. So that is the speed at which it just processed that form. And I'm just going to read it. I'm going to read it out loud so you can just see. One of the concerns I think a lot of coaches have is that AI sounds robotic. And I was going to show you that you can train it to sound a lot more human, a lot more kind of nuanced, and that it understands kind of just the nature of working with people, and then it's not going to sound like a robot. So Henry, that chest press PB is absolute class, seriously well done. However, we need to chat about that shoulder. Pull-ups are off the menu immediately until we sort that out. program will be modified to focus on rowing machine work because it knows I've got access to a rowing machine, and resistance band exercises to keep your shoulder happy whilst it recovers. With work stress ramping up, 6 hours of sleep and no energy, your body's waving a flag. This week, stick to 2 workouts using dumbbells and rowing machine. Ditch overhead and pull-up movements. If the shoulder pain continues beyond a few days, book a support call. It's got the access to my support system. We'll get you back on track, but recovery first, hero gain second. Smash the chest PB, hit a workout. So overall, kind of gives you a summary at the end there. The purpose of this, guys, is to show you the speed with which it can process check-ins, number one. Number two, the nature and the language that it can use. It doesn't always have to sound like, the M dot, not this, that, ChatGPT sort of guff that it often produces, that using systems like Claude, which uses this system, and with the correct prompting, which is essentially the message you give the system, it can be a lot more personalized and a lot more human sounding than a generic sort of approach. So hopefully you should start getting them coming through now, and it should be working all good. So the last one is a call analysis. So this is essentially the final bit. Now it's difficult to show you live the automation component, but hopefully you guys got the email asking you to download Claude. And this is just a way that you can take a transcript essentially from the client call that you've had. Maybe this is a client intake call. Maybe this is more of a discovery style call where you're just having a conversation with a potential client about the program, but you want to extract the details from that and not be on the call as I am now. I don't want to be writing notes down. I want the AI in the background to be taking all the notes for me so I can be more present in the conversation and not be distracted. Because ultimately the bad way is usually handwritten notes. There's no database that collects all the information and you kind of houses all of the history of the conversations you've had. And number three, it means you're a little bit more distracted when you're writing because you're distracted by handwriting your notes. Ultimately, that's a poorer experience. So what you want to do is the following. You want to use something like Fireflies, which is what I recommend. Something like Gemini, which is inbuilt within Google Meet, does the same thing. But Fireflies, again, is a purpose-built AI transcriber, and that's going to take notes as you're on calls, essentially. So rather than you being there having to write the notes, it can just be in the background, taking notes, and does all the follow-up actions for you. What happens then is the client that gets sent their notes instantly. So it summarizes the call and it sends it out to them. It can create tasks for both you and the client. So let's say you've had a conversation around a tricky week for the client. Let's say they've had, challenges around being adherent to their nutrition protocol, or they have struggled to be consistent with their training program. It will create actions because it'll identify that was a problem. So as the coach, it will give you follow-up actions. As the client, it will send them follow-up actions, and it will obviously store it in a database. So you then have things like reminders to follow up with that client to make sure that they're on track. Or if the action on that task hasn't been taken and the deadline for that task has been passed, it will trigger another action to say, follow up, make sure it gets done. So it's a lot more efficient. It builds up this kind of knowledge base, which has got loads of purposes. Like, let's say you've had all these calls with clients and the AI is starting to recognize there's loads of patterns emerging which you might have missed, but maybe there's a really, really common pattern which can then be built out into some sort of support document for your clients. So you then got a knowledge base where if the client asks a question, you can build out this knowledge base, which you can then direct them to. You may have answered that question so many times on calls that you've already got all the answers there inside of this knowledge base. We can use that to support your clients again. So rather than you having to every single time start from scratch, but the support answers you're giving, you've got this database of answers which you can refer to. So that's pretty powerful. Another really good benefit of that is if it's more of a sales type conversation, maybe you're talking to a prospective client about the program and you're kind of maybe handling objection around, maybe not joining the program, that type of thing. Again, it can become your sales coach. So it can look at the transcripts of calls and say, look, this is where you did really well. This is where you did not so well. So recently I did this myself, actually. I kind of trialed it with a recent conversation I had. And it gave me a B+, which was okay, areas for improvement, but it gave me sort of 3 things that I did really well in the conversation and 3 things that I'd actually missed. I didn't even notice the tone of the voice that person was giving at that point in the conversation, but the AI did. So I knew in the follow-up conversation then that was something I needed to look out for and I wasn't going to miss it next time. So if it's just you reviewing the call, you almost don't know what you don't know. So that's where AI can also help you. So both from a sales conversation perspective, from a support call conversation perspective, you basically can build up this knowledge base of support materials. So imagine you just had a client call. I've basically made a document for you guys with the prompt that you can add into Claude and also the transcript from the conversation. So it's a made up conversation, and we're going to let AI handle this and create notes and follow-up actions for us. Now we're going to do this in a more of a manual way just because of the nature of this call, but you can automate it if that's something that would be of interest. So if we go to the Google Doc, if you click on this link just here, this is the document. So just to explain what this is, I've written the text in black and I've made up this conversation in blue. So the prompt is, you first of all need to give the AI a role, because this massively increases the response quality. So rather than just dumping in a question, you first of all give it a role. You say you're a top level coach known for analyzing coaching calls and providing detailed analysis with action steps. The task, you're going to give it detailed steps to follow as if it was a human. So analyze the following transcript. You're going to write a single sentence summary so that the coach has clarity. Identify the top 3 themes. Identify the agreed action plan. Outline a to-do list. And then you give it this sentence, which basically says that it's really important you get this right. And this hugely increases the quality of responses in AI as well. So that's just a kind of a side note. Make sure you give it a sentence basically saying how important this task is. You will get better responses that way. In blue, then I've made up this conversation, which is with Alex, and he's the PT, and you've got Jordan, who's the client, and essentially he's having an issue with adhering to the program or adhering to his nutrition on weekends, kind of binge eating on weekends. So all the blue is the conversation. We're feeding that into the prompt. We said it's the end of the call. And then a bit of context. This is a coaching call with a client working with Gains and Pains, a coaching company known for supportive but light-hearted approach. They work with clients to get great results. This call is taking place after the client hit a bad run of weekend binge eating and needs the coach's support to overcome this. So I'm giving it some specifics next. You want to give it just a plain text response and some subtitles, so you've got a neat sort of formatted response. The example is kind of in brackets, so it's got the exact structure you want it to come out in. And then the important final step I'd usually recommend here is put clarify. So you want it to ask you a question back if it isn't sure of something you've just fed it. So you can just watch me do this if you like, or you can follow along. You're just going to select all of the text and copy it. We're going to go to Claude, and we're just going to pop this into the first chat box here. So again, I've just shown you the whole transcript there and the prompt. We're now just going to feed it into Claude, and it's now going to process this. So the first question it's asked is, who is this analysis for? Is it for Alex to review after the call, or will Jordan, the client, also see it? In this case, we're going to say this is just for the coach. Now, hopefully you can see already the importance of this sort of follow-up question using AI, because in doing so, it gets more clarity on what it actually wants from you, so you don't have to continually refine the answer. So this is just for the coach. Let's see what it says. So here's the call summary. They're going to give you the top 3 themes. They're going to give you an agreed action plan to follow. And then it's giving you, as the coach, the to-do list. So it's going to say to update a plan with 200 more calories, push to updated targets, set a reminder, and review progress at the next week's call. Now, this is what I would call a manual AI step. You're using the AI, but it's not automated. Now, for the sake of this interaction, it makes sense to do so because there isn't a live call that we can kind of interact with in the same way. But if you want to, there is a way that you can trigger all of these actions to happen and to be stored in a database and to create to-do lists for you. For the majority, however, just using this as a framework is really, really good. Okay, quick question from Charlotte was, what's the difference between Claude and ChatGPT? Great question. So with Claude, the difference is it's a separate company. So there's 2 companies, OpenAI, who have ChatGPT, and you've got Anthropic, who run Claude. The founders of Claude were originally working at ChatGPT, and they didn't like the way the company was moving around data protection and regulation. So they set up a more secure AI model, which is called Claude. So number one reason why I like it is data privacy is much, much better. They've got a much kind of more closed loop system. In other words, they don't train on your data quite the same way, and you can opt out of that a lot more readily than ChatGPT, which trains on your data a lot more consistently. Two, the responses, as you guys have seen already from both creating the onboarding intake form or the document, I should say, and the responses to the check-in is a lot more human sounding. So it doesn't sound that, you probably know what I mean when I say it sounds like ChatGPT. You've seen enough of it now probably to recognize when something's been written with ChatGPT. It just sounds highly robotic and it doesn't sound great. As a coach, we want empathy. We want it to sound, much more empathetic and a lot more kind of human than ChatGPT. So that's reason number two. And reason number three, it's a lot more powerful, essentially. What's called the context window, which is how much data it can handle, is significantly larger. So if you feed it massive long documents or huge amounts of data, it can also handle that at a much greater scale. So it's more secure, it is more human sounding, and it's got a much bigger data processing layer, essentially. So that is the reason why I'd recommend it. You're welcome. It's got any kind of finalized questions, but the thing I want you to think about is what you would actually do if you've got all that time back. Now, for some people, it's about growth and it's about, okay, I've got more capacity now, so I can take on more clients. For other people, it's more of a lifestyle thing. It's actually, I'm maxed out with where I'm currently at, and I just want to be able to reduce the hours that I'm putting into the business, or at least not spend as much time on the admin side. There's probably two paths there that you're considering. So just try and have a reflection. Don't need answers now, it's just a reflection question. If suddenly you had 10 hours back every week, which is a significant chunk of time, would you therefore want to grow the business by increasing your capacity to work with clients? Or would you want to simply get life back and spend time with family and friends, or prioritize your health more, or whatever it is you wanted to do with that time, and just can maintain the business at where it's at? It's a really important question because there's different ways you can utilize this sort of solution.